Just have a special announcement for my listeners. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for listening. Started off as an experiment in August, but I've had about 2,000 listens of my podcasts, and I'm so grateful. I have a special request for my year-end episode 2020, which has been an incredibly interesting year. I plan to do an episode of listener feedback. So what I'd love for you to do is leave me a message, and the link is in the show note, about what you took away. What was one thing after listening to several episodes was the most impactful to you, that helped you in some way, or was an insight you hadn't thought about before? If you can do that, then I will be sharing some of those insights. You can see that link in show notes. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille Barmel. I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker, and I help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals make an impact through improved performance. In this podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders to define practical lessons that you can use to make an impact in the face of uncertainty. In his teens, Ruben Dua watched his dad watering trees in the backyard and saw an opportunity. Over the course of his childhood, he observed his dad connecting with people everywhere, from taxi cabs to restaurants to his patients in his role as a physician. And then the penny dropped. The proverbial seed was planted for Ruben as he knew how he was going to make his mark on the world. Ruben is the CEO and founder of Dub.com, a frictionless video communication platform that transforms human connection in everyday interactions. In this interview, we talk about his inspiration, which is to make it easier for people to build trust. And we talk about how he is leading his 21st century organization with an unconventional paradigm. Ruben, how are you?
Hey, great to be here. Thank you so much.
Good to see you again.
Likewise.
Yeah. Well, thanks for making the time to chat with me. I was so interested the last time we were talking. I mean, you were interviewing me then, but I was more interested in you, and I didn't get a chance to ask you a bunch of questions. And so I'm glad we were able to set up this time to do that. Ruben, I talk to a lot of people that are dealing with disruption, right? Leaders leading their teams, navigating disruption. I haven't yet talked to a lot of disruptors, which is, the little I've learned about you and read about you is that's how I'm seeing you, as somebody that's trying to change things for the better. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about is kind of your story, your narrative. What are you trying to change? But I have a huge bias in understanding our childhood and adolescent experiences as a way of kind of bringing clarity to our way we behave and the way we lead. So I'm going to ask you, hopefully it's not too much of a surprise. I'm going to ask you, are there any childhood experiences or adolescent experiences that you think were really important in setting yourself on the path you're on today?
It's such a good question, because I think so much of what we experience in our childhood kind of parlays into our adulthood and our careers and even our interpersonal relationships. And there was a moment I remember in my childhood where, my father, immigrant from India, came in the 70s, came, right at the divide between India and Pakistan, seeking to get educated in medicine. And, I remember as a child, I think I must have been, maybe 13 or 15 years old. And I remember seeing my father after he went and had a very busy day at work. And I remember seeing him going to the backyard and taking the hose out and watering all the trees in the backyard. And there was a line of trees in our backyard. And he went to each and every tree and he watered it. And he just stood there. And this wasn't during the days where you could have a cell phone in one hand. He was just simply watering those trees. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, he's a brilliant man and he is the opposite of lazy. That's why I'm here and why he's there. And I realized in that moment that I never want to do what he was doing because, there are so many things that we can automate, and there are so many smarter ways that we can do stuff. And I realized in that moment that first of all, he's a brilliant man. So I don't want to downplay any of that, but there is this idea of working smarter, not working harder.
Right.
And this idea of having an abundance-based mentality, not a scarcity-based mentality.
Yeah.
And when I saw him in that moment, using his valuable time away from his work, away from his family, watering those plants, because he didn't want them to die and he wanted us to have a nice garden. He was making a choice. And I think I pulled from that we all need to work a little bit smarter. We all need to value our time. We need to delegate. We need to use technology, and ultimately have the chance to be happier, which means spending more time with our families. And don't get me wrong, he spent a lot of time with us and continues to. And, he's evolved a lot since then.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember that moment as a catalyst.
Wow. That's a great story. I draw so much myself from my experience with my dad. Similar story of immigration. My parents came from East Africa, where I was born, watching them work so hard and work long hours, picking up the work ethic, but also seeing the things that I want to carry forward in my life, plus the things I want to do differently.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, my dad and I had a chance in my late teens, 18, 19, to actually work side by side, where he kind of gave me some authority in the family business. And we used to clash a lot. But it's at that time also that I realized, wow, my dad's smarter than I ever gave him credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And so the wisdom in those practices, right? The watering of the trees, there was wisdom in it, but there was also opportunity for improvement. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that story with me. That was really, really awesome. So fast forward for me now a little bit, your background, your kind of career background, there's a lot of work in marketing, digital marketing, demand generation, a lot of work in startups, a lot of work in advising other startups. So tell me about some of the things that you've been involved with.
Yeah, so I think for me, my career path it's been linear in a lot of ways, but it's been completely non-linear in a lot of other ways. Yeah. My career actually started in the internet industry. So it started in the year 1998. I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as a young kid, and that was my first startup. And we had this vision back then to allow people to express themselves, to have profiles, creative profiles online, which would trigger networking and allowing to ultimately get hired. And it was kind of an early sort of weird social network kind of portfolio profile sharing platform. It's weird to call it a social network because it was very early, but we were trying to innovate. And that was right before the whole .com bust. And, we were a casualty of that. But, it was an extremely good learning experience for me and really an inspiration for me because it allowed me to really tap into my innate desire to just help people communicate and to bring, authenticity to business efforts. One of my frustrations throughout my entire career is that, when things are overproduced or when they're inauthentic or where there's some lack of trust that appears from one person to another person, that things start to fall apart. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, people don't know that that's happening. It's unintentional. And they might not even realizing that it's happening on the other end. And I think that sort of unlock has been a massive part of my desire to innovate within marketing automation, within technology, within demand generation, whether it's the way that we, communicate with our prospects, whether it's the way that we leverage video, whether it's the way that we generate leads for the business or automate certain parts of our communication. I always go back to this idea of how do we build more trust and how do we remove friction from that communication.
So that's really cool because in there, what I hear is kind of the lessons you learn by watching your dad, which is trying to find ways to make things easier. But then at the same time, you trying to make sure you protect the sanctity of human connection and human relationships and authenticity. And those two things, trying to make things easy, because I can't wait to talk a little bit about the platform you created, Dub, because I had a chance to try it, and it was so easy. And I shared the video with somebody, and I'll have you talk about that a little bit. And it did create a real impact. They called me immediately once I sent them that video. And so it was easy, lessons from dad, and it was really authentic and genuine, which is kind of your own blueprint of what you're trying to do. Would you say that's your purpose in life, is to kind of strengthen authentic relationships and communication?
It most definitely is. There's this book which I'm a fan of called Freakonomics.
Yeah.
And in the text, they talk about this idea of how when doctors, let's go back to my dad, who's a physician, when doctors have empathy towards their patients, when doctors apologize to their patients, when they're honest with their patients, there are dramatically less lawsuits, less malpractice lawsuits that happen, which is just good for everyone, because the world does not need more lawsuits, especially for healers. So, this idea and this thing that I would continue to see from my father, which is being open, being honest, being empathetic, being compassionate, breaking down some of the friction that might typically exist in a relationship like that. That has always been a massive inspiration for me. I recall when my father was the physician of Jermaine Jackson, the late Michael Jackson.
That's a story there.
Yeah. So, I remember the stories that they would share and the trust that they would build, and I remember when Jermaine would come to our house growing up, which happened a couple of times. And I remember where, he had such a connection to my father. He felt so much trust with him, because of the relationship that they had created. I always remember that. I always took from that. And I said, how can we take and allow more business people to have that type of a relationship where outside of the workplace, outside of the hospital in this case, there's actually a friendship here.
Yeah.
And I would continue to see that over and over and over again. And I would see that with the way that he communicated with, the staff at the hospital, always with respect, the way that he infamously would always talk to people on airlines, which would always embarrass us.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, Dad, why do you have to talk to everyone? Like, just because we're in a cab or on an airline doesn't mean you need to start a conversation.
Yeah.
But that whole time I was listening.
Yeah.
I was listening, and I was hearing him listen to other people and learning from other people. And they would always smile and always trust him. And he would always respect them and tip well. And, and I think I took those moments in my life, and it took me a long time to kind of connect all the dots, but it was a massive inspiration for me. And now, the story that you shared with sharing your story, with wanting to connect with someone, and then having that be a kickoff point for an elaboration in the relationship, that's inspiring for me.
Yeah.
So
that's incredible. So thank goodness for our parents, and you've always been aware of the lessons you've taken from your folks.
I think so. And I'll also say this, that families are all different. Structures, and the idea of a nuclear family is that means nothing anymore. I mean, now I think mentors, they come in many different forms now. It could be a father. It could be Zig Ziglar, it could be Tony Robbins, it could be someone that we find on YouTube. So there's so many different types of mentors, people, great kind of teachers for us. And I think in my case, it happened to be my father, along with a lot of other folks like authors and speakers and leaders and whatnot. But I think for everyone, it's different.
Yeah, very good. So that really does, I've been waiting to go here because I want to talk about the platform you created, Dub. So I won't do it justice. I will just tell you that I really enjoyed using it, and I was really surprised how easy it was. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what was the inspiration behind it. I think you've touched on that a little bit already, and then tell us what it is. That would be great.
There's this adage, know, like, trust. And in my opinion, it's broken. It's completely the opposite. We can't open our eyes, open our minds to even know someone, to see them, if we don't feel trust in an environment, right? It just doesn't work like that. If we're, in a retail situation and we're going into a retail spot, a shop, and, we don't trust our environment, we're not willing to even look at a person, to hear a person, there's no way that we're going to get to know them, like them, or even trust them to buy something. So I think that the biggest problem that we're all dealing with on the internet is actually trust.
Mm.
And the reason why I believe that to be true is because, unfortunately, with great technology comes all sorts of great risks and all sorts of bad actors that have abused all these magnificent things that are around us, whether it's Zoom or whether it's advertising or whether it's email, fundraising, e-commerce, the list goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel like what we're all trying to get over right now, whether we're in sales, whether we're in business development, whether we're a coach, a strategist, an executive, a leader, it doesn't matter. What we're trying to do is to get people to trust us and to create a trustworthy environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I noticed early on was that specifically people in any type of business development, any type of outreach, any type of communication where they're trying to get people to just have an open mind, open heart, is that the first problem that they were having a hard time getting over was that trust, and actually getting to someone to actually lean in a little bit, take the arms out of this position, and actually to see the light.
Mm-hmm.
And what I quickly realized was that video helps in so many ways because it shows our authentic lives, our authentic selves. It allows us to communicate in a way where it cannot be contrived. It actually has to come from the heart. I mean, unless you're an actor and a method actor, it allows us to build that trust or that connection. So based on that idea, along with the general sort of friction within communication in this day and age, I think that's really where Dub was born. And we started with this question of what are some of the things that are people trying to communicate? What are those? Are they things that we see on our screen? Are they things that we see with our eyes where we can, capture with our phones? Are they, from a webcam that we might capture here? Are they images? Are they documents? The list goes on. So we started to kind of slowly build based on a priority and based on customer needs, this idea of visual communication, all centered around an easy to use platform that ultimately helps everyone in some capacity, whether it's this message sender or message receiver. And here we are several years down with that thesis. And it's been very exciting for us because, it's definitely hit a chord. And I think that, for obvious reasons of why we need to have asynchronous video, why we, want to use video instead of a Zoom call, instead of text. A lot of those things have been, fortunately, opportunities for us. Mm-hmm. So we're still on this path. We're still students. We're still listening. And it's been a lot of fun. I will say that.
Yeah. So now let's get to the nitty gritty. How does your platform work? So I work a lot with salespeople. I do a lot of work with helping salespeople be more authentic and develop closer business relationships and have the business acumen to truly understand what their customers are going through in their businesses. Yeah. So let's say I'm also looking for business. I'm looking for clients. I'm a salesperson myself. How would I use Dub?
Yeah. So maybe what I'll do is I'll paint a picture of a before and after. Before maybe sending a lot of emails, a lot of follow-up messages. They say the gold is in the follow-up. I agree with that to a certain extent, but I also feel like why chase instead of generate demand? It's outbound versus inbound. It's a total paradigm shift. So sending a lot of email messages, sending a lot of messages on LinkedIn, these are the typical initiatives, activities of someone in sales or business development, right? The after, once you've got the Dub Chrome extension installed, once you're using Dub with Gmail, with Outlook, with LinkedIn, now is go to that interface, go to your Gmail, click the Dub icon, record a video from your screen, from your webcam, and capture your thoughts in a video format. And then have it instantly add engagement onto that video page that you're going to generate. And this just means calls to action, calendar integrations, forum integrations, e-commerce integrations, all the things that you might have in your funnel, have those automatically get added on that instantly created video page. Okay. And then send that over the wire, send that over email, send that over LinkedIn, send that as a broadcast to a large group, large audience. And then, get the results. See what happens once you do that. See how people connect with you, and then see how people engage with some of the activities that you've presented to them, i.e. the calls to action.
So, I mean, I can see the application with something very specific that we focus on teaching. So we basically, one of the things we teach is how to earn the right for your customers' time or your prospects' time. Typically, our research shows that most buyers will say that out of all the salespeople that call on them, 93% of them are a waste of their time. So that means when you come in to see somebody or try to get some time with somebody, they've already assumed that you're like the 9 out of 10 other people in the past, that you're lost even before you said a word. So then we say, okay, if you want to be in that 7%, you have got to be so crystal clear on what they care about. What's their business issue? And then articulate what it is that you can bring that's relevant to their issue, and articulate that in a very compelling way in probably around 10 seconds to just earn the right to sit down at their desk and have a conversation with them.
Wow.
Now,
that is a problem that we need to solve.
That is a problem. And so we have a framework that is very simple, and we move people through it, and we get them to a place where they can create a sentence called the relevance statement. Really, it's about creating relevance very quickly. Yeah. Now, what the challenge is it's fine to do that when you're kind of knocking on somebody's door, but how do you get to their door? And it might be fine to do it if you're picking up the phone, but how do you get them to answer the phone? And you can put it in an email, but people are not reading their emails as much anymore. So what you've described as this kind of really quick way of creating a video is, I feel like somebody could just do a bit of research, identify what the customer's business issues are, and then record a 10-second video that says, to the customer, as we've been working with companies like yours, we've identified that generating a profit margin is really the most important thing right now during these times. And I've got some thoughts and ideas on how you might do that by focusing on this aspect of your business. I'd love 5 minutes of your time to just walk you through that. Now, delivering that as a video message in an email, to me, would seem so much more powerful than typing an email or leaving a voice message. And that's, I think, what you're offering here is a way of sharing that interaction. Pretty powerful.
I really like how you set that framework. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Actually, this is something that I'd love to learn more from you about, because this is precisely what we try in the best way that we can. And we're not experts at this. This is not our expertise. This is your expertise. But we always try to really, I think, do 2 or 3 things that you mentioned. Number one is to understand that you're going in a situation where, as you present, only 7% of the people can actually get that opportunity to right off the bat. And then the second thing, which you mentioned, which I wish more people did, which is research.
Yeah.
Investing the time. A lot of people don't have a problem sending 17 emails to someone, but you ask them, hey, did you do any research before you sent that first or third message? And the answer might be no. And it's like, why? That's crazy.
Yeah. I run into people all the time that struggle with crafting the perfect email. And it creates so much agony and anxiety for them to craft that perfect email. And then likelihood is that email never gets read. But yet, they can articulate to you what they're trying to say very easily in a much more compelling way. And it's like, if you could just record that, you're done. Like, you don't have to agonize over writing this long email that likely won't ever get read. And so I think that's the pain point or opportunity I think you've touched on. So this is really interesting because, it's always hard to define the essence or where is the start of disruption. We see disruption in the marketplace, right? We see the Ubers and others, but we're not there to see the conception of the disruption. And what you've described here is, for me, that conception of that recognition that authenticity is king, even more important now than ever before. And here's an idea on a way to transmit authenticity in an efficient way. So kudos to you for starting this out.
Thank you for saying that, man. We're still on our journey. I think a lot of our process is just listening.
Yeah.
What we thought this would be is not what it is now. And that's simply because of customer needs and data and learning and seeing what works and what does not work.
Ruben, what's the biggest thing you've learned if you look back to when you started this company? I'm sure you learned so many things, so picking one will be hard, but what's the one thing that is like very different now than what you thought it was going to be when you first started?
That's a great question. I think about this a lot. I think for me, ultimately, it comes down to the if you peel the onion behind the activities that you're doing, right? What is the inspiration for that? What is the real reason why you're doing that? And
Mm.
unfortunately, what I've realized is the vast majority of the time, unfortunately, is that the reason why we do things is out of fear. The
Mm.
reason why we're getting a makeup artist, we're getting professional lights, we're producing our videos is because we have a fear that our authentic videos like this, more casual in nature, are going to look unprofessional. And
Mhm.
that's why we go and do that. Or if we're going to, take, 6 months to produce a white paper, a research paper,
Mhm.
because we have fear that if we do something that we create on, Google Docs or PowerPoint or Word, that it's going to look unprofessional. These examples go on and on, but unfortunately, it's a reality. And I think what I've sort of realized, and I'm really a student on this path, is that a lot of that stuff doesn't matter
Yeah.
because it's about the core content. It's about, we make we get an impression of someone within the first 1 or 2 seconds. And then once we pass that, that's when we really get to what they're saying and their soul and their
Yeah.
content. And that's what's most important. Now, I'm not saying that we should all look shabby and, not care about that. That's very important. And design is a massive important of what we did,
Yeah.
of what we do continually. But at the same time, get to the core of your goal, get to the core, where you're trying to ultimately provide the most value and not cover anything up.
Yeah. Have you read the book Content Trap?
No, I don't. I'm
Oh,
intrigued.
you would love it. It basically it's a tome about 2 inches thick, but you just articulated the core essence of the book right
Mm,
now. So it's written by Bharat Anand, who's a professor at Harvard Business School,
mm,
and essentially he makes that point is that focusing too much on kind of the design, the content, the beautiful aesthetic, without focusing on the core, the essence, the degree to which what you're creating creates connections in
mm,
your life, with other parts of your life, with other people, will be a detriment. So, in fact, some of the best ideas that have grown significantly have been ideas that focused on stimulating connections with people's lives, stimulating connections with other people. And they've been products that connect. And in fact, the first interfaces, the first marketing was actually kind of crude and probably a little bit rougher on the edges. But these
mm.
ideas took off because they sparked a human emotion. Craigslist, perfect example. Craigslist probably still does, but looked ugly when it first started, right? But what did it play on? The idea of creating connections between
Mm.
buyers and sellers of things,
Great example. Yeah.
right? And so there's lots of examples in the book, but I think you'd really get a kick out of the book. I enjoyed it immensely. I
Yeah,
think it was,
that makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah,
I totally connect to that. Wikipedia is another really good example. Even I think what Google has done with design, specifically with their material design,
yeah,
that whole play, it was such a, I think, a fix within the design world, because design a couple of years ago, it got out of hand. The skeuomorphism, where you would open up an app on your phone and it would look like wood and it would look like a bookshelf and it
yeah,
would look like little knobs that you turn.
yeah,
And they realized that was, God, it takes so much effort to design like that. And now it's all about the use and it's all about the functionality.
absolutely. The essence, the things we knew when we were in kindergarten, right?
Right.
That's
Exactly.
awesome. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about, what does it look like to start up and manage a disrupting organization? Because as I've been watching the pandemic unfold, I came from a traditional organizational background. We had a building, we had people, everywhere in the same place. I had a few people out, and I think a lot of organizations have realized they actually don't need people all in the same place to work and do good work after, the shutdowns in March. But I gather that you've probably had people distributed all over the place in various different ways of working, even before the pandemic. Am I right?
Yeah, we've been an extremely virtual company since the beginning. A huge, huge for this model. I think one of my favorite examples is the company Zapier.
Oh yeah.
Zapier is pretty much all remote company, 100% remote now, definitely. And what they do is they have an annual retreat where everyone gets together at a great location. I'm sure this year it was virtual, but companies like that, I think, really lay the groundwork for now what is this virtual movement. So we had an office at WeWork, and the reason why we had that, and the reason why I'm still a believer in the idea of co-working, is because work is about being productive, but it's always a content opportunity as well.
True.
As a video company, we were always thinking about that. So, the WeWork that we were at in Hollywood, there's so many great locations, and so we don't have that office anymore. Now we're 100% virtual. But, I think this is truly the future. And I think it's ultimately, I think it's going to be in a hybrid situation. I think a lot of this also comes from this idea of, parents not being able to see their kids, or pet owners not being able to be with their pets. These moments where, we might spend 3 hours out of our workday, commingling and socializing with people in or around our office, at the water cooler, at the kombucha on tap, but we're missing out, with our family and our pets and our friends, maybe.
True.
And I think that's a little bit of a market correction for us, because that's, the close-knit environment, whatever that may be for a person. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think I saw one of your videos. I don't know if it was a marketing video, but I think you had your son in the video, right?
Yeah.
It's like this time has made that so much more acceptable, right? Like,
Yeah.
I was on a client call this morning, a client I'd only talked with once before, but the call started with him showing us his dogs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is an individual in high finance, right?
Right.
Would normally probably be in a blue suit and a tie, downtown Wall Street, New York.
Right.
And here he is in a t-shirt, and he's showing me his dogs. What a much better situation than
Yeah.
past, right? Really, really cool.
Well,
So-
I think one of my great inspirations, I think, was Southwest, the Hawaiian shirt, and just the general culture behind Southwest, which is unfortunately in not a great place right now because of our environment. But the idea, I think, that Herb Keller had back in the day was that let's remove all the friction, let's remove all the awkwardness and the over professionalism, and let's have this be friends, friends helping friends. And that's what he did so well, whether it's the way that they sing happy birthday, or whether they, crack jokes on the microphone, or wear the Hawaiian shirts. I think that type of culture of just loosening up a little bit, I think it's just helped us all, because it really goes back to that place of, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it because I don't want to look unprofessional? Because now it doesn't matter. I can communicate with someone and I don't really care what they look like, what their hair looks like, or what they're wearing. It's about what they're saying, what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. So you've got people then all over. Can you tell me a little bit about your org structure? What does it look like geographically?
Yeah, we actually have our team members in China, in the Philippines, East Coast, West Coast. We use some services. We use a video editing service called Video Husky. And what they allow us to do is to have a staff of interchangeable video editors, because we're producing so much video content, whether it's on our YouTube channel, the Daily Dub, or whether it's our tutorial videos. We use another design service called Design Pickle. And this is a quote unquote unlimited design service. So we're constantly giving them kind of jobs to do, whether it's carousel posts for social, or whether it's webinar graphics. So we're constantly going through that process. And then, Fiverr, honestly, is one of my favorite websites. And, a lot of people think that Fiverr is not corporate. Fiverr is for small solopreneurs, or for small little outfits, or unprofessional situations. I totally disagree with that. I think that you can find some magnificent people on Fiverr, people that have worked at Facebook and Google, and people that have consulted Fortune 500 companies, or designers that have done some amazing things. The reason why I love Fiverr is because it's sort of a first test point to be able to do something, whether it's a new design, or whether a deck that I want to get designed, or a script for a video, or whatever it may be. There's pretty much anything that you can find there. And it's just a really good way, cost effectively, to hire a virtual workforce and then get data, information, deliverables that you can then use or have,
Yeah.
put on the shelf and not use.
Yeah. So it's interesting because availability of those kind of services actually really reduce the barriers to entry for somebody who has a really cool idea but doesn't know how to take it, bring it to life. Knowing that those experts are available all over the world is quite empowering. I mean, even me, I remember even before I knew of Fiverr or Upwork as another one, I was thinking about starting my own business. And I had an idea of what it could be, and I stumbled upon this ad for Upwork actually, and I said, well, let me experiment with it. Like I had a full-time job, I was working, and I put out a posting for somebody to design a logo. And within like 24 hours, I had 20 applications to design my logo. One guy actually did it. Didn't even take any money from me yet. He said, here's 10 designs. Hope you pick one. If you do, it'll be $25, right? And I didn't end up going with that guy, unfortunately, because I liked another person. But he was like in Pakistan, and I paid him $75 US. And I feel so good about my logo. And it was so easy. And I focused on the expression of my idea, and he brought it to life. And I think that availability of that is so powerful for innovation in our world today. And it's pretty cool to hear how you built an organization that leverages that kind of thing in a number of places. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I'm so glad you brought this up. I think this is a really important topic because there are a lot of skills that are getting outsourced. Logo designers, it's tough to be a professional logo designer if you're based in North America. It's tough because a lot of your jobs get outsourced. A lot of them get sent to overseas or Fiverr, Upwork, or whatnot. And I think that, how do we solve this problem? Like if someone is a quote unquote logo designer, how do we solve that problem? It's someone with a hard skill, someone where, maybe it's become commodified, maybe that there's obviously some group that can do it for much cheaper. And I think the takeaway from my perspective on this is that the world is always going to need folks that are experts at strategy,
right?
And B, the personalities, the people that are actually interfacing with clients or prospects. And these two things, among a couple others, but these two things, I think, really give me peace of mind for job security. Because I know that even if I am a logo designer and my work gets outsourced, I can become an expert in building a brand story, on branding, on communicating a brand, on being an evangelist, or if it's something that can be outsourced from a soft skill perspective, being a leader, teaching folks how to do that, where I don't have to be an expert at it, but I can be an expert at teaching it, and I think that this is a solve for a lot of people that get concerned about, is my job going to get outsourced?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. You touched on something earlier at the beginning of our conversation, which reminded me of something I read in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what you've talked about now also reminds me of something, which is this idea of when there's a bunch of stuff happening around you, you can either be upset and angry that they're taking my job or I can't compete with that rate. But instead, if we focus on what can we control, we can level up our skills. We can spend our brain energy being much more intellectual, being much more creative, and focus on what we can do to make ourselves better and more competitive is really where the opportunity lies. So you don't get so upset and angry with all these tools out there that might be creating opportunity for somebody overseas, but taking away something from you here. Is just change your mindset and how you look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think that, this idea of thinking big, high level thinking, with a strategic perspective, I think it's critically important that we all do that in our lives. I was on a call with a designer recently, and the first thing that the designer mentioned to me is that some of our colors are not matching. This is purple, this is blue. And it was kind of a jarring experience for me because, what I was looking for was, who is the target audience and what is your brand message? And if you were a car, what kind of car would you be in? Where would you be in 5 years? And what is the feeling that you want to get your clients, want to get? And there was such a disconnect because like anyone can tell me that the colors are not matching, but it takes a real strategic thinker to say, here is the larger brand story.
Right.
And ultimately I ended up not working with that individual. But we kind of went in a different direction. And that's where we went 10,000 feet up and we say, okay, who is our target audience? What do we want them to feel? And it was a liberating experience. And we would have spent, 100 times more money to get to that place versus focusing on the minutia.
Yeah, very cool. I could talk to you for hours and probably days, Ruben, and hopefully we will, and we'll continue this relationship that we found online, which is really cool. To wrap up, if people want to learn more about you, learn more about Dub, I know you have so many kind of tentacles reaching out there. What are the best ways for them to kind of connect with you or learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So LinkedIn is definitely my go-to spot, / Ruben Dua. Dub.com is the company. Take a look. Dub.com with two B's. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, Twitter, everything at Ruben Dua is where I'm at. I encourage people to go check out Dub, grab a free account. We have a completely free account. So we're just trying to help people streamline their comm.
Yeah, very cool. I'm really grateful for your time today and your mind. Thanks for sharing so much of your experience, knowledge, and sharing the questions that you're always thinking about as well.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for the time. I look forward to doing more things like this with you. I know that you and I have a webinar that's coming up in the future. I cannot wait to do that.
Me too. Me too. Very cool. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Shaquille.
There were 5 key things I took away from this conversation. The first was very interesting, that his entrepreneurship is guided by his desire to help people communicate and create authentic, trusting relationships in business. That's something we sure need right now. He also talked about how trust breaks down unintentionally, and it's often built unintentionally. That spending time thinking about how you actively create and lose trust in your relationships is a really good investment. He's also talked about taking the time to peel the onion, to uncover why you are doing the activities you're doing. He said that people are often motivated in their activities out of fear. Doing things out of fear often causes us to spend time on low-value activity. Making things easier, faster, more efficient creates more time to invest in human connections. That's something we should all endeavor to do. Those were great thoughts for me, and I hope you enjoyed them. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked this episode, please do rate or leave a review. It'll help others like you find this show. See you next time.